Army versus Tulane really goes to show you just how wacky college football can be because Tulane looks moderate in their rushing attack for only running the ball 58% of the time, whereas Army's doing it at a man's rate of 84%. Conversely, in the NFL, the highest rate you're going to see is about 47%, so they're both well above that. As for the advantages, we'll start off with Army. I almost said Alabama. Very different. Army's biggest advantage, in my opinion, is Bryson Daly. I think he's decently better than Darian Mensah, as Daly is an elite rusher of the ball, and Mensah is a much better passer. He can actually pass, whereas Daly can't really. But Daly is such a good rusher. He really is. He is basically an additional running back. He's got good power, he has good enough speed. He's very interesting in how he's combined together. So I think he's the better of the two quarterbacks. If you're gonna get into a shootout, give me Mensa any day of the week. But otherwise, I think Daly is going to be pretty good for a college team. The next advantage Army has, as you could probably imagine, it relates to rushing again. It's that Army's run blocking is a lot better than Tulane's run defense because Tulane's run defense is about average. And according to PFF, I believe Army has the best run blocking in the entire nation. If not, it's the second best. So it's really, really good. And Tulane, it's not bad, but in a matchup like this, you need to specialize in the run game, and they don't. The next thing I like for Army is that Noah Short should have a lot of success against this run defense. That may seem like I'm making a second positive out of one thing, and to an extent I am, but I think they're separate because one is run blocking and the other is actually the running back. So I think they're a little bit separate. The next thing I like for Army is much smaller because they don't pass basically at all, and they're not going to pass the one guy in particular either. But what I do like for them in regards to the passing game is that they have a very good wide receiver in Casey Reynolds. He is, I would say, decently better than any Tulane defensive back. So that's one thing that Army has going for them in the passing game, which I never really thought I would say in the modern era, at least. The last thing for Army is that they have home field advantage. That is something. It's not the biggest deal, but I think it matters probably a bit more in college than it does in the pros. So that's a big advantage for a team that is looking for anything they can get. As for Tulane, they have similar advantages to Army in some regards, with the initial one being that they can run block on Army's poor run defense. Tulane is very good in run blocking, and Army is not good in run defense. It's kind of funny. Army specializes in the run on offense, but not really in stopping it on defense. So that's going to be an advantage for Tulane. Moreover, Mackay Hughes will have, I think, great success versus this run defense. If I'm going to give an advantage to the run blocking of Army and the running back of them as well, I'm going to do the same for Tulane. They have an elite running back, so that's going to help them a lot as they're going to be running a lot. One thing that is going to help them in the passing game, though, is that they only have one good edge in Army. Elo Modozi, I think is how you say it. He's the only pass rushing threat for Army. If you can block him, the entire Army pass rush just ceases to exist. So that's going to have to be the prime focus for Tulane. And I think they're going to be able to do that. I think they have good enough scheme and enough talent to focus in on one guy. He's not even elite, Madozi, but he's far and away the best thing that Army has going for them in the pressure department. The next thing I like is that they have a very good wide receiver in Yolkith Brown. He is going against a pretty poor nickelback slash defensive lineman. There's kind of a question mark there. He's a defensive lineman, according to some of PFF's positional labels. He's registered as a nickelback, I should say, but he has played as a defensive lineman for about 200 snaps, I believe. Chase Keith, or Chance Keith, rather. Keith is not very good, and Brown is rather good. So that's a pretty big advantage for Tulane. Another thing that Tulane has going for them, this is a much bigger advantage against basically anybody that isn't Army, but it's still an advantage for them, is that they have an elite pressure against a very unprepared Army pass blocking. So if they can defend the run against Army, they're going to really be able to get after the pass. And that's going to be interesting to see because Army is going to be dinking and dunking ideally when they pass, if they do pass. But if Tulane can get them into obvious passing situations, this is really going to be a massacre. Because for the next two advantages, they have edge rushers over offensive tackles. As they have Matthew Fobbs White, he is much better than offensive tackle Lucas Scott. Scott hasn't really had a chance to show how good he is in pass protection, but that to me is going to suggest that he's also not good in that regard. And the same thing can be said about Aiden Huntington over Connor Fanous. I don't know how to say it. He is also like Scott in that he has no experience pass protecting, basically. So that's going to be a big advantage for Tulane if they can defend the run well enough. I don't know if they're going to be able to, but I think they stand a chance. At the end of the day, they're going to be able to sell out to exclusively stop the run. And even if they get caught lacking and Army does end up passing on them, their pass rush is so good and the pass protection for Army is so poor that I think Tulane stands a chance to get in before any of the routes really open up. As a whole, I lean Tulane here. This is a very difficult game for me to evaluate just because it's such a gimmicky game, but I think Tulane has better talent to them, and I think they have proper scheme skills to really get after what Army wants to do. I also meant to mention Tulane has 7 advantages, which is something I fall back on when deciding between these games, especially when it's close. I think that's one of the better ways to decide who's better. Those are my thoughts, though. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section, and also be sure to like and subscribe for more football content.